Let's have a quick conversation about how to change a sole proprietorship to an LLC. So here's an overview I want you to really think about. But before I get into the nitty-gritty, I'd like to give you two very practical examples so you know how important this whole discussion is. A lot of folks talk about sole proprietorship or LLC interchangeably. They have no idea what they're talking about. And so I want to clarify things from the get-go. So when we talk about sole proprietorship versus LLC, it's important to go back to the origins, so to speak, real quick. A sole proprietorship is a business structure made up of a single owner who keeps all the income of the business, but also takes all the liability risk. Very important. That person takes the liability risk. With this structure, there is no separation between the owner of the proprietorship and the business itself, and the owner pays income tax on all the profits earned by the business. So I want to give you two practical examples so you have a clear idea what I'm talking about. Example number one, Joshua, a sole proprietor, sells car parts out of a rented space. And Joshua just inherited $1 million from his grandparents and runs this small business on the side. So he only makes about $50,000 per year selling car parts. One day, a customer comes in, tries an auto parts, and has a life-threatening allergic reaction. The customer sues Joshua for $500,000 and wins his lawsuit. The customer can recover $50,000 from Joshua's auto part business income and the remaining $50,000 from his inheritance. This is example number one. So the client can actually recoup $450,000 from the inheritance that he got from his grandparents. Scenario number one. Let's talk about scenario number two, example number two. The thing is, but before I talk about the example number two, let me just explain to you what an LLC really is by contrast. An LLC can have one or multiple owners called members who get all the income generated by the LLC, but the LLC takes all the liability of the business. So an LLC is a separate legal entity and creates a separation between the owner and the business. So there is a clear divorce between the owner and the business. So let's talk about the example number two here. So in the earlier example, if Joshua owns an LLC instead of a proprietorship, the result is different. When the customer sues the LLC auto part business for $500,000 and wins his lawsuit, the customer can only recover $50,000 from the LLC's assets. The remaining $450,000 cannot be collected because his inheritance is considered a personal asset, which is separate from the LLC's assets. See, this is really good. Boss, welcome back to the show. It's really a pleasure to have you here. Make yourself comfortable. We're going to have a very enriching conversation about how to change a sole proprietorship to an LLC. So here's the approach I really want you to think about. Why you might change your sole proprietorship to an LLC. Now, when you really analyze everything, one of the core advantages to changing your sole proprietorship to an LLC is the personal liability protection. Think about it. Personal liability protection, if you think about the examples that I just gave you, you can see that your personal liability is you're really protected here. So you have the personal liability protection. Also, you also have the asset separation that the LLC structure provides. So those are two important elements to consider if you are thinking about if you currently have a sole proprietorship and you want to switch to an LLC. Personal liability protection and asset separation that you want to have. There are several reasons why making a change to your business structure might make sense. For example, you want to hire employees. Remember, a proprietorship can hire employees, but this will make taxes and accounting significantly more challenging. With an LLC, you are able to better separate business and personal tax and account information, right? You need to have this divorce that I just spoke about. You need to have this segregation here. Additionally, if you were to face a legal conflict with an employee, stuff happens, you will have an extra layer of protection if you change to an LLC. It doesn't matter if you have known this employee for years. I know him, I know her. We're really tight. No, stuff happens. So that's the first thing. If you want to hire employees, you might want to change your sole proprietorship to an LLC. Second scenario, if you want to protect your personal wealth, you might want to change your sole proprietorship to an LLC. Let me break it down for you. Whether you have personal wealth when you started the business or your personal wealth is a result of the business, you want to ensure that your wealth is protected. With a proprietorship, Your personal assets are at risk whenever the business faces the debt dilemma or is sued. With an LLC, your personal wealth is protected from all liability of the business. This is what I'm saying. You are trying to cover your ass. Let's just say it very clearly. You need to cover your ass because anything can happen. It doesn't matter if you know the employee, or even if the employee is a family member. That could be even worse. If it's a family member, things can go really, really far, and really it can be really dirty too. By the way, boss, I want to quickly remind you of today's topic. We are having a conversation about how to change a sole proprietorship to an LLC. The third situation that might invite, let's say, a change is if you want to save money on taxes. Let me break it down for you. The thing is that a proprietor pays self-employment taxes on all the income generated by the business, all the income. So depending on how much money the business makes, these taxes can be really costly, especially if you are in a field, if you're in a sector where you are making tons of money. Now, if a proprietorship upgrades to an LLC, it has the option to elect S Corp status, S Corp, S Corporation. So under this tax structure, instead of members paying self-employment taxes on all the LLC's income, they only pay taxes on the reasonable salary paid out by the LLC. And the remaining income is considered a dividend, which is not subject to the same taxes. So if you have some kind of knowledge of the U.S. tax laws, you know that dividend is actually considered sort of a capital so you have a capital gain tax on that dividend. So you might pay like anywhere from 0 all the way to 15%, or in some cases 20%, which is very different from the 33 or 38% maximum income tax rate that you might pay on personal income. So what I mentioned earlier, reasonable salary. Now, the notion of a reasonable salary or reasonable compensation is not clearly defined by the IRS, because they haven't actually put out like a table with all the salary numbers to give you some kind of idea of what they're talking about. But they just are saying that what is reasonable is what somebody in your field, in your sector, in your geography would make. In other words, if you are thinking about how much you would pay yourself, which the IRS will think of as reasonable, ask yourself, if I were working for a company, not for my company, but for another company, in my geography, with my level of experience, how much would they be paying me? I want to give you some steps here. So, let me just break it down for you, how to change your sole proprietorship to an LLC. If you're thinking an LLC is a better fit for your growing business, you want to first familiarize yourself with the steps to make the change, right? It's all about getting the knowledge first. You can do it yourself. In other words, you can DIY your LLC formation, not a problem. You can use an online formation service, or you can hire an attorney. Hiring an attorney is the most expensive option. Using an online formation service is basically the mid-tier option. Doing it yourself is free. I mean, of course, you have to pay the LLC filing fees at the state level, but the only thing is you have to spend time on the whole thing. For most business owners, an online service can be a strong option for saving time and stress over completing and filing paperwork. So the process for starting an LLC for those who already have a small business and new business owners is the same, with a couple of nuances. So the first thing you want to do here is you want to check if your business name is available. So if you want to change a sole proprietorship to an LLC, very first thing you need to do is to check if your business name is available. Because you don't know. I mean, you got to see if the name your proprietorship has been operating under is available as an LLC name in your state. So you want to perform an LLC name search on your state's Secretary of State webpage. If it's available, you'll need to follow your state's instructions about designation terms. For example, adding LLC or some variation to your name, because LLC naming is a little different from S corporation naming or C corporation naming or LLP naming or just sole proprietorship naming or even DBA, doing business as. So there are some regulations. There are some regulations around naming, business naming. So step number 1, you want to check if your business name is available. Step number 2, you need to get a registered agent. So all LLCs through the U.S., by the way, I just need to mention that LLC happens at the state level, not at the federal level. So all LLCs throughout the US, they are required to have a registered agent. So this is an individual who is responsible for receiving important legal and financial documents on behalf of the LLC. You can choose to be your own agent, or you can hire a registered agent service to take on the task. Totally possible. By the way, boss, I want to quickly remind you of today's topic. We are having a conversation about how to change a sole proprietorship to an LLC. Step number 3, you need to file paperwork with the state. As I just told you, everything happens at the state level. When you think about business formation, LLC formation, everything happens. We are talking about a state process. So you need to file your LLC's organizational documents with the appropriate state agency, usually the Secretary of State. But please go to your state's website and go to the Department of Corporate Affairs and see what really happens, because some states, the department that handles everything is different from the Secretary of State. It really depends on the state. So the documents I'm talking about is often called the Articles of Organization or Certificate of Formation. So while called different things, they contain the same general information. So you have the name and address of your LLC. That's the first thing you need to have. You got to explain the purpose of your LLC. So everybody who reads this, any I would say average observer should be able to understand what your LLC is all about from the get-go. Nothing complicated. You need to really talk about the name and addresses and the name and address of your registered agent. So if it's you, you have to give your own name. That's why a lot of people do not want to be their own registered agent, because then their address will be publicly available. They don't want that. They want to really segregate their personal affairs from their business affairs. You also need to mention in the Articles of Organization basically the management structure. So if it's member managed or manager managed, really important to think about it. So after filing your organizational documents, you should apply for required business licenses under your new company. So depending on the type of business you have, you probably need one for your sole proprietorship as well. So this might be transferable to your LLC, or you may need to apply for a new license. So this is kind of important. Let me give you an example. Let's say for the last 3 years, you have been operating as an architect, and you were a sole proprietorship. And now you just converted your sole proprietorship into an LLC. Now, depending on the states where you're in, your architect license might transfer to your LLC, or you might need to reapply for a new license. Step number 4, you need to draft your LLC operating agreement. Remember, your articles of organization are different from your operating agreement. So while not required in every state, it's always good practice to create an operating agreement to govern your LLC. And again, I want to insist on the fact that you don't need it, but it's great to have an LLC operating agreement, even if you are let's say a single member LLC. In other words, you're a one-person LLC. You still need to have some kind of operating agreement. So everybody who really reads about your operation from outside, they have a clear idea how you operate. And this document is a contract between the members and the LLC that details the big picture and day-to-day operations of the business. So this is a great place to include details about things like transfer of ownership conditions, accounting information, voting rights, and so on and so forth. And an operating agreement that details the financial accounting of the business will help keep the LLC's liability protection strong if it ever faces a legal challenge. So this is actually called if you are able to have the right sort of protocol, the right foundation for your LLC, you are able to maintain no judge will be able to pierce that corporate veil. Step number 5, you want to get an EIN. EIN stands for Employer Identification Number. So the thing is, after doing everything, after drafting your LLC operating agreement, it's important for you to have an EIN. The EIN will help you, for example, get a business loan, open a business bank account. You can get into a business lease agreements. Okay, so an EIN is essentially a social security number for your business that you can get for free through the IRS. Okay, I just want to insist, and I always insist on this. Do not let anybody razzle-dazzle you, telling you that you have to pay to get your EIN. You can get it for free. It is available for free. Okay, And you will need one if you plan to hire employees or if your LLC has more than one member. If your sole proprietorship becomes a single member LLC, you will not be required to have one, but you might benefit from getting one if you plan on doing any of the following: hiring employees, opening a business bank account, or doing business with vendors or lenders, for instance. Okay, as long as you want to establish some kind of business credit relationship, you will need an EIN as well as a DUNS number. By the way, DUNS number, you get it from Dun and Bradstreet. It's also really important to understand that you have flexibility. The law gives you flexibility here. You can switch from sole proprietor to LLC, not a problem. The thing is that you are just changing from an informal business structure to a formal one. Now, the state where you're in will determine everything. Okay, so when you switch, it means what? You will be officially forming a business under state law. One thing I want to say here is that things are simple if everything is within the same states. But if you are, let's say, moving from one state to another, things could be a little complicated. Let me give you an example. Let's say you are in New York. You started 10 years and you've been a sole proprietor in New York for 10 years. And you actually, now you are in New York and you're about to move to New Jersey, and you want to be an LLC in New Jersey. And at that point, it can be a little complicated because you might have to actually register as an LLC in Jersey automatically without actually looking at your prior experience. Either way, it's always easy. Okay. Now, are there any disadvantages when it comes to changing from a sole proprietorship to an LLC? Well, the only disadvantage to changing this is the cost associated with the filing. You will need to pay the filing fee for the initial formation paperwork and the annual reports fees to keep your LLC active. And so this cost varies from state to state, with the lowest state costing about $40 to $50 to file, and the most expensive state being $500. So this is really, really, really high for some small businesses. In some states like California, LLCs cost up to $800 per year to keep active. So, and again, you gotta keep active, because if you're going to apply for a loan, whatever, a lender will ask the state authorities to send them a certificate of good standing to see if you're still active. Okay. And how do you actually transfer assets from sole proprietor to LLC? Well, as soon as your LLC is formed, your first step will be creating a business banking account for your LLC. Next, you want to discontinue all of your sole proprietorship and only operate under your new LLC. Then you will assign the proprietorship assets to the LLC, which can be done in a few ways. For example, you can use the assets from the proprietorship to purchase ownership in the LLC. In other words, you have capital contribution. Your LLC can purchase the assets from your proprietorship. You can use a transfer document depending on the type of assets. Either way, transferring assets can be a tricky business, so consider again seeking legal advice from a local business attorney before making any moves. And so this is but overall, it's always a great idea to change from sole proprietorship to LLC. If, for instance, you're thinking about taking on investors, adding a partner, hiring employees, purchasing a workspace, or if you have increased personal wealth, which means what? You have to protect yourself. You have to cover your ass. Thank you so much for your attention. I really appreciate it. In today's conversation, I was talking to you about how to change a sole proprietorship to an LLC. So I give you the overview, the approach itself, the steps you need to go through if you want to make things happen. Hopefully this added value to your life. Thank you. God bless you. I'll see you next time. But until then, remember, stay marvelous.